So, quick kind of survey from you all. How many of you got 20 customer interviews in the 3-week window? Awesome, congratulations, that's great work. These are going to compound on you a little bit because every month there's work to do. And one of the things you'll find about being in a startup, especially since in most cases you as the CEO and founder are the product manager. So you're the one that's closest to the product, closest to the customer, closest to the features. So one of the things you're going to want to do is you're just going to keep building that list. And if you weren't here last time, go back and review the slides from the last go around because we talked about using MailChimp to build a progressive list so you can continue to keep in touch with those people who you interviewed. And if you do it on a once-a-month cadence, they'll remember who you are. If you do it once every 6 months, they'll totally forget who you are. If you do it randomly, they will take themselves off the list, right? And once a week, by the way, is way too much. It's like a bad dating relationship if it's once a week. So don't do that. So you're going to build your email list. You're going to add to that list, and after every customer interview, you're going to say, "Can I put you on my email update list?" It'll come out every month, and most people will say yes. So some people will opt out, totally fine. You should not take it personally, right, if they opt out. But usually if you ask them in the end of the interview, they'll say yes. So you just want to be in the habit of like think of it this way, after doing your first 20 interviews over this last month, if you had a list of 200 people who were interested in what you were doing, how easy would it be to do 20 interviews? So that's what you're effectively doing every month is you're just building on that list. Okay? So given that, we're going to talk about value propositions first. I'm going to have you do an exercise that really helps you with your value proposition because as you do those interviews, how many of you noticed that your pitch changed? You're like, oh, it went from somebody who was like, I was totally confused by what you said, then it went to, oh, I totally understand, to like, I really got to narrow down into what the value proposition is to the customer. So that's one of the hard things to do. So your opening slide, which is your overview slide, is the hardest slide to write. It's easy to dump out a series of bullet points, right, on a group of slides, and we see it a lot in board meeting minutes, right, or board meetings agendas. People are like, I got all this, I got to go talk about all these things. And you're like, yeah, but what's the one thing that's really important? Like if you had your board around the table and they could discuss and help you brainstorm one important thing, what would it be, right? Versus what are the 64 things you'd like to show us that you made progress with, right? And really more important, it's like, what's that one thing? How do I help you with that one thing? Okay. So your value proposition from a positioning standpoint is you want to hold a place in the customer's mind. One of the ways you think about doing that is, can my customer repeat my message to their friend or coworker or boss? Because if they can't repeat your message, the answer is it won't sell. So almost everybody is going to have the question of like, who do I need? I just came out of a meeting with Dustin, and I have to talk with my boss, or if I'm an angel investor, my wife, about why am I writing a check on this deal? And if I'm like, it's a really sharp guy, and they're doing really cool stuff, and it's like, for what and for who? I'm like, this is a great question I didn't ask. So what you've effectively done is you've made me do your work for you. In case you don't know, investors are completely lazy. In fact, human nature is completely lazy, right? So if you do the work for me and I can repeat your message, totally cool. If you make me do the work, the answer is not going to happen. And in the venture capital world, it's slightly worse. So the venture capital world, you all have met Carson. Carson's my son. If we weren't related, but I was his boss, and I was like, hey, did you see any interesting deals this week? And he can't repeat your message to me, then he jeopardizes his career at the firm because he can't repeat the message to you, right? So your job is I'm going to start with an opening value proposition. I'm going to summarize at the end with that, and probably one of the things I'm going to say is, if you forget everything else about what I've told you today, remember this one thing. Because I just want to use this information to get the next meeting if it's an investor, or to get the next customer call if it's a customer. So what's that value proposition? And it's going to change and iterate over time. So just know it's going to change. It's not like a one and done, drop the mic, I'm finished. So it really ties to who your initial customer is. Do you know who that customer is? Of your first 5 interviews, how many of you went a direction like, I know my customer looks like this is who they are, and then after 5 interviews, you're like, maybe not. Okay. So you're going to have that experience as you do customer interviews. You're like, I'm totally committed to this, and then you're going to find out that's not my buyer. So keep iterating on that because it'll get more and more refined. Limit your product and service first. So one of the things we're going to talk about later is what's your product vision when we get to the product. Like as an investor, I want to know that you have a vision, like somewhere you're going to take it, but I want to know you're going to survive long enough to actually get to the vision, which means what is the feature you're going to ship today? So when you do your next 20 customer interviews, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to start asking people like, well, we're thinking about 3 features we could ship. Which one would you rank to go first? So you're not leading the customer, you can rotate those features, and after a while people are going to be like, yeah, that one doesn't matter, and oh, that one's really cool, or tell me more about that one, right? And you're going to use those interview questions to inform your decision about what goes on in your initial MVP, but a year from now you're going to use the same questions to inform what goes on your product roadmap. So you're going to end up with, I have a product roadmap, we have 3 new features we're going to ship in the next build, we haven't decided what feature it is yet, I'm going to go do surveys, but now I have an email list. And I'm going to ask the customer the question, I can ship this feature, this feature, this feature, which one would be most interesting to you? And that results from that are going to be like 82% of the people said they wanted this, right? Which is, and well, the crazy thing is the founder, you're like, I know the customer is going to want this. Remember we talked last month, my name's Dave and I'm an entrepreneur, right? I just test everything because I know I'm wrong. The question is which thing am I wrong about? Okay. All right, so think about what products and services you want to sell, and then what's the claim you want to make? What's the outcome? So this is the difference between a feature and a benefit. Why am I buying it? What does it do for me? And you want to know in the customer's mind, oh, this is the product I buy for this thing. So Clayton Christensen, he's at Harvard Business School, covers a lot about innovation. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma. He talks about you're hiring a product for a job to be done. So what is the job to be done, right? In Dustin's case, his customers use it for fundraising for events. So the job to be done, it's like we need to raise more money for these events. That's the job that they're hiring his product to do. So if you don't know what that job to be done is yet, keep iterating on it so you can go back to the customers and go, I think that the job you're hiring me to do is this, right? That's what you're hiring our product to do, okay? So that's the positioning. It's a place in the customer's mind, and you want to be memorable. Not like wacky memorable, but like crisp in your value proposition so that people are like, oh, I understand what you do. Now the next question is will you pay for it? We'll get to pay for it next month. But right now it's like, is the product positioning is there? So here's what I want you to do. Just take 5 minutes right now, and I want you to write this down. You can use your phone, you can use paper, whatever you want to do. But what makes you different? What makes your product different? And by the way, cheaper, faster, better is fairly ambiguous. So I want you to be a little specific. So what's different about your product and why should people buy from you? So take about 5 minutes to just write down some notes on what you think that is given your first set of customer interviews. Okay? Okay, quick question for you. If you look at what you just wrote down and you look at your pitch that you read to the mentors earlier, does it map? Is it the same thing? Kind of? Sort of? Same theme? Okay. So this is where precision is, this is one of those, I would have written you a short letter, but I only had time to write a long letter, right? So it's like you have to spend time to actually craft those words. So you're going to come back to this and iterate on it a bunch, but I just wanted to, while it was there, it's take the informed decisions that you're getting from your customer interviews and use that to further refine your pitch. When you're doing your pitch, I would rather have you be passionate about this is the customer we serve, and then find out in 2 weeks that you were wrong, then make it this is the customer we serve and never pick one. Does that make sense? So I'd rather you say we're selling to people that buy this product this way. And then you'd go do 20 interviews, you're like, haha, those people don't care. And then pivot it rather than be like, oh, we sell kind of to everybody and we don't really know. So when you come and pitch at the event like next Wednesday and you're like, everybody buys our product? The answer is, oh, so you don't know yet. So when you say that, what the investor hears is, we don't know who our customer is yet. Versus if you're like, I know our customer is this. Be like, I can't really argue with you. And then if your answer is, and we've interviewed a bunch of customers and these types of customers told us this, then the answer is you have data, right, where I have opinion. But if it's everybody, the answer is you don't know who your customer is yet. So there's a whole bunch of lines I like to use as an investor where you're like, when you say this is what I hear. Anybody use the phrase, we're building a platform? No. Okay, so there's an honest answer in the back. So if it is we're building a platform, the answer is we don't know what we're building yet, but we're going to discover it as we go. So when you say we're building a platform, what I hear is we don't know exactly what we're building yet, but we're going to make it up as we go along, which is totally okay. But to have a platform, people have to build on it, deploy on it, and manage on it. Otherwise, it's not a platform, right? All right, so you're going to park this. You're going to come back to it. Your customer interviews are going to inform it. This is going to be content on your opening page for your MVP. And at some point, you just have to write the content and post it. And you're going to get through that drill in the next 30 days. So let's talk about product. So as you go through the process of doing customer interviews, you have a hypothesis about what you think you're going to do. You do the customer interviews. Your vision and where you ultimately want to go is super important. But for the MVP, you will never ship an MVP if you try to ship your product vision. You have to basically build a work back plan. So if you're going to be this at scale, you have this much money at launch, and you have this much time to launch something. The question is, what features are you going to drop so you can get something out there so people can be like, yeah, I like it, or no, I don't like it, right? So you're going to basically narrow down those things until you have something like, the first version we want to ship is going to have these 2 features, or it's going to do this. Part of what you're trying to test here is what do you want to learn from the test, right? You want to learn how they use it. You want to learn if they're going to buy it. Like, what do you want to test? Can it be done? Is a really tough test versus can I get people to convert? So for many of you, the first test you're going to do is like, I think I have an idea that people would respond to. I could buy ads, get them to land on an A/B test on the landing page, and then I can see if they actually show interest. But the question you're trying to answer with that one is, can I buy ads on Facebook and get people to a site? Right? Or can I buy Google AdWords and get people to a site? Or does anybody even look for this thing that I'm pitching? So if you're building a new product, we'll talk about next month, a new product in a new category that nobody's doing search words for, you can't buy Google AdWords for it. Nobody knows your product exists. You may find it within a theme, I can buy keywords around a theme, but if nobody knows what they're looking for, no one knows my product exists, it's really hard to get traffic that way. So you have to do outbound traffic, not inbound traffic. So outbound is you have to figure out who the right customer is and then go call on them and ask them for a demo. Versus if it's inbound, if there's traffic there to buy, now the question is, can I economically get the traffic model to work for me, which is a totally different question. And we'll talk about that next month about customer unit economics and how you monetize and how you sell and model. But right now, the thing is, what are you going to ship? Because what I'm going to walk you through the mechanics is, how can you actually do something this month where you can get somebody to build a product for you at minimum dollars? So we'll get to the nuts and bolts of that. So remember, we talked about early on in month 2, like start with the problem, don't start with the product, right? So really focus in on it. Is this the product I have that I'm trying to push on a customer, or am I sure that this is a problem they're trying to solve? Because as you do customer interviews, if the customer's answer is this really a problem? And they're like, meh, that's bad. Because no one's going to like swipe their credit card for meh. Right? They're going to swipe their credit card for, that's amazing. If you built that, I would buy it. Like, that's a good customer interview. So figure out what you're not going to ship. As you look at your list of features, figure out, like, Dustin, how long have you been working on your idea?
11 months.
How many features are out there that you're like, I'm not going to get to them in the next quarter on the product list?
Oh, a lot.
A lot of features.
Yeah.
So we have this thing at all of my board meetings. We have a list that goes from board meeting to board meeting. It's called the important list of things we're not doing now, which is incredibly clarifying, right? Because somebody will come up with an idea and we're like, that's a brilliant idea. And we're already looking at all the stuff we already have to do already and how much money we have and how much team we have and how much time we have. And we're like, shit, we're not going to get to that. Now, we don't want to lose the idea, so we want to park it, right? But we also have to recognize we're just not going to do it now. And that's totally okay, right? But it may be a great feature for a future release, but you can't do everything. So take that list and put it in a list of important things we're not doing now. You may get to it at a later date. Yep.
How often do you reprioritize things to account for one of those and let that?
So the question is, how often do we reprioritize? So when I'm in build mode, I'm in 2-week sprints. So I've defined my sprint. I know what I'm going to build. We agree on what we're going to build as a team. We go do that, and we either hit that sprint or don't based on how much time we have available. And then as we go into the next sprint, we make a decision on what things we're going to pull off that list. If it's just you, the initial set of questions is going to be, here's what I think I need for my MVP. I'm going to go test those customer interviews. And then it may end up being two-week sprints to get it done versus the first sprint gets me to X and the second sprint gets me to Y. So one of the things you'll find, especially in the software development side of the world, is everything's in a sprint. So that's just the mechanics of how it works. So just know it's going to be on the list. One of the things you'll hear software developers say is imagine a world where. So imagine a world where this thing does X, right? So you'll hear that in the software vernacular. So if you're not on the software dev side of things, just know that at some point somebody's going to say, so imagine a world where, and you're like, what does that have to do with anything? And the answer is it's just a way kind of programming works from a methodology perspective. Just know that that's out there. All right. From an MVP, you're going to take that list then and narrow the feature set down. You're going to do your first version of it as a PowerPoint or Keynote. And what you're going to do is you're going to work your way through like the actual workflow of how you want the site to work. So what's the features? What's your text? What's your value proposition? That's going to be slide 1. There's going to be a call to action. How do I buy? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to sign up for email? Like what action do you want me to take? Right? So and you're going to build a workflow in what's called a wireframe. And you're just going to use PowerPoint or Keynote to start. And the idea with it is there's a next button there, but frankly, you could use the arrow key or you could use this one and it would do the same thing. It looks like a website, but it isn't. It looks like a mobile app, but it isn't. It's just PowerPoint or it's just Keynote. So, but the process there is make sure the workflow makes sense. Because if the workflow doesn't make sense to you, then when you hand it to somebody to build, they're going to be like, that's kind of weird, but we'll build it that way because that's what you asked for, right? Because they don't know necessarily what you're trying to do. And if you give somebody the wrong thing to build, I've thrown a bunch of stuff away because I'm like, wrong thing. And you just want to do that, right? You want to be like, does the workflow make sense? And we'll talk about some of the tools that you need to go to do this. But do you need to show registration? No. Like, oh, we did OAuth to log in. That's good if you're OAuth, not if you're you. Like, I want to know, like, these are the screens I need. These are the sequence of the screens I need. Here's where I need buttons. Like, just do the basics of it in PowerPoint. And frankly, even if it's ugly to start, it's only you who are seeing it and working your way through it. So just start and get to it. You're going to go back then for your demo, and as you start to do customer interviews, you're going to take your laptop with you. You're going to be like, and this is what it does. Next, arrow button, right? And because you're just going to mock it up and see if people respond. Does the value proposition flow? Is there a call to action? Is there a form that they can fill out to give you their information? Is there a place for them to buy? Some of you heard me say that I've taken them all the way through credit card, and then when they hit submit, it throws a 404 error, right? It's my 404 error, by the way. I'm not capturing their credit card information. I just wanted to know if they would commit to buy. People are like, well, isn't that inauthentic and don't you disappoint people? Yes. But frankly, the first version of a bunch of stuff I've shipped wasn't great and they couldn't buy it. I just want to know if they're like, if they're interested enough to put in their credit card information. You don't have to go all the way to that end. I just think it's worth, if I'm spending $1,000 on AdWords, I want to know, right? And if they're landing on A/B testing landing pages and there's no call to action, the answer is you don't really know much other than they click to get over on an AdWords page. So just know that you can take people down a much further process than you think. All right. The prioritize build we talked about, and then continue to do the customer development interviews. From an MVP perspective, here's a bunch of tools. I sent out Draftium today in the Slack channel if you're not on it. There's a great company called AppSumo. AppSumo sends out amazing, incredibly cheap deals on tools. So they're kind of a tools company. They send it out probably a couple times a week. They'll send out a promo. Like Draftium, the last one there on the list, is basically an MVP tool. So how many of you know WordPress? Awesome. For those of you who don't know WordPress and don't want to, you can use Draftium because it has call to actions and 300 templates, and you can do 10 projects at a time. I think they even have A/B testing landing pages, and it's $39 for a lifetime account. Like super cheap, right? So in that link, you can get the $39 price point. No affiliate fee required, right? But AppSumo has a bunch of tools like that. So instead of you having to become a WordPress expert, like, well, which plugin do I use and which, like, Draftium's super cheap. InVision, anybody used InVision before? Awesome. InVision is the quality way to do a demo that you can send somebody that it's like, it looks great and like it's a great tool. If you haven't used that and you want to use, there's a wireframing app tool. So there, all the boxes and buttons, and you can make it look like a mobile web app, right? And again, the first few versions of this, they're not going to be pretty. That's okay. You just want to see what would this look like as a tablet? What feature do I want to have? Do I care what the hero image is? Riley and I were talking about this earlier. No. Like, I don't care what the hero image is at all to start. I just want to go get it up and say, does it feel right? Right? Am I moving in the right direction? Does the flow of it work? Is the content there? So these are just tools. If there's any other tools, by the way, an ongoing request of you all, Emily and I were talking before we started. One of the things I publish at the end of each month is a list of resources, which includes blogs and books. Emily and I were talking about there's not a lot of diverse talent writing blogs and books about startup stuff. So if you know people who are diverse and inclusive, please send me the list and I'll just publish it because it's awesome. So yeah, and they keep building on the list of all the tools. So if you have favorite tools, send me the favorite tools. They'll go out in the same deck. Yeah, I'm not in the tools business, so I don't really care, but anything that makes your life easier is important. All right? So I'm going to talk about a mechanic to use for cost to build. These are links to a series of 4 blog posts I did that will take you through, like, step by step of how you write a specification. Right? So it's like, here's the feature, here's how you write it, here's how you set up the WordPress site. Like, it is super mechanical. So I'm going to save you from that tonight and not walk you through it. But you can walk through each of those steps on the blog post. We'll walk you through the step-by-step version of it. So it got to a point where I was just like, I'm just going to write a spec so somebody can be like, oh, that's not that hard. And the answer is, you're just trying to communicate to somebody, what is it you want to build, right? And not get all squirrely on you, right? Because it's like, us as founders, we're like, I'm in the weeds. I'm up with vision. I'm in the weeds, right? And I'm trying to get you to go, here's your linear path that you want to go follow, all right? So writing a spec, picking a vendor. I'm going to walk you through the mechanics of picking a vendor because I just want you to understand this is not rocket science stuff. And then ultimately, what's it going to cost you to build your first MVP? How many of you already have an MVP? Awesome. How many of you are developers that already have an MVP? Awesome. I don't need to go talk to customers. I just need to keep coding. Not that I know any of you at all. Riley, I know you and I were talking before. Are you a coder by background?
No.
So you learn to hack together stuff in about how long to make your MVP?
I would say probably like 2 weeks worth of research and learning. And if you can give me something that I can't build, I would be very surprised.
Okay. So here's my point. In the time that you spend grousing about the fact that you can't find a technical co-founder, I taught myself PHP and CSS and learned how to go hack together a site, right? I learned to become a WordPress expert. You can use the other thing. You can hire Riley. You can hire, right? The point.
It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, so exactly.
It will be ugly, but it will work.
So, but the point is don't wait for the miraculous co-founder to show up, right? Because there is no miraculous co-founder, right? They're going to be completely, some of them may be ugly. I'm not calling Riley that. That's not my point. But the point is you can make a lot more progress than you think you can, whether you hack it together yourself or whether you say like, hey, I'm going to take, I took about 8 weeks and did a bunch of online courses. The irony of it is I ended up being the CEO of Code Fellows, which seemed kind of funny in retrospect. I was never fast, just to be clear, and I haven't done it for a long time again. But when I was talking with somebody, I'm like, well, how long is it going to take to build this? And they're like, well, we think it'll take about 9 weeks and about 3 people and about this cost. I'm like, really? I think I could hack that together over a weekend. Now, to Riley's point, not pretty, but I just wanted to test it out. So here's the process you're going to use for figuring out your cost. You're going to write your spec. What is it you really need to be required at launch, right? Nothing more, just what's required. You're going to do the design flow in PowerPoint. You're going to test that design, and then you're going to revise your spec to make sure it's just tight. So you can hand it to somebody and have them help you build it. And then what you're going to do, and this is super tactical, but I just did it last week. What you're going to do is you're going to take this information and you're going to go post a job on either Upwork or Fiverr. And you're going to post for, I need to put this in the script as well. So the post was, I'm hiring 3 people or firms to sit in on a 1-hour conference call where they will have a chance to review my spec, do questions and answers, and then give me a proposal. So I'm going to pay them all 3 or 4 people who sit in, I'm going to pay them all $50 to sit in. So what's their obligation? They have to read this spec in advance. They have to ask questions during the 1-hour conference call. They have to document the conference call because I want to make sure I don't have to document for them, but they have to document for me. This is the way program management works, right? I'm thinking about doing this. And they're like, so you really want me to do X? I'm like, I said I was thinking about that, but yeah, I think that's, like, I want to know that can they help manage me through a process when I'm not a product person in many of yours case. So what you're going to do is you're going to post the job. You're going to have them sit in on the conference call. They're going to deliver back to you their meeting notes, their questions, and a bid and a price for phase 1. And on that call, between the triangulation you're going to get with all 3 of those vendors, they're going to help you define what phase 1 should include, right? Because 2 of them are going to go, that's a lot to build. And if you want to build that in one sprint, that's probably going to be hard. And somebody's going to be like, yeah, they're probably right. That's a lot of work. So you're using that to capture, are these the right folks for me? How do I communicate with them? I don't really care what time zone they're in. Doesn't matter to me. And frankly, I don't care if they're designers. What I'm after right now is just functionality, right? I can add design to it. So you're going to post that job, and it's going to cost $50 a piece. And what you're going to do is you're going to then get 3 proposals back. I will tell you my bias at this point, and there may be a $700 proposal and a $1,200 proposal and a $15,000, who knows what it is, right? I'm going to pick 1 and probably 2 to build the first phase. So here's my experience with Y2. Ultimately, somebody's going to fail, right? And what they said they were going to do and what they could do were different. But on Fiverr and on Upwork, you can post these jobs, and like I could have started this evening at anybody not familiar with Fiverr? So Fiverr is basically crowdsourcing tasks. So at the beginning of this one, I could have said, hey, Scott, do you have a logo yet? No, Dave, I don't. Well, let's make a logo for you. And I could have gone to Fiverr, put in $50 and said, I need somebody to build me a logo for Scott's new company. And we could literally, we would literally watch people bid on the project while we were here. So, and anything for me that's super tasky like that, I'm like, I need to do research on such and such. Because for $15, I can get somebody who will go do it for me for $15. It's amazing. Now, will it be a pretty logo? No. Will the MVP be something that you build your future product on? No. You're going to take this and you're going to throw it away. So just know that in advance, and it's totally okay, right? But what you're after is, could I build an MVP? So the cheapest I've ever built a relatively complex MVP was $1,400.
Can you define complex?
What's that?
Can you define what's
complex? So the functionality was, there was a database query, there's a series of screens that interacted, that produced a database query and a result. So nothing super complex. I kind of followed the LinkedIn process as my analogy, and I literally screenshot something from LinkedIn. If you guys have a Mac, you can use Sketch. Anybody know what Sketch is? So Sketch in Evernote is basically a tool that allows you to do a screenshot and use arrows and move stuff around. And not being a designer, what I wanted to do was communicate with somebody, well, I kind of want this here and I want this here. So I would do a screenshot of that area and I would do arrow, big arrow over here and small arrow here. Like move this stuff around this way. And then I would get the wireframes back. I'm like, yeah, that's better. Right? So your first version of this is going to be, functional. That's why you want to do your first version in PowerPoint, So when you do the demo for somebody online, they're like, okay, I get the flow that you're doing. It's going to match that flow, and now I need to build something that works. Okay. So lots of great tools, lots of great ways to go about it. There's CMS, so content management systems are things like WordPress. So there's a CMS called Craft CMS that's built by a team in Bend, Oregon that has built-in database functionality. So you're like, there's stuff that literally you can stand up by watching some YouTube videos. So you don't have to post the job on Upwork. You can take time to learn because you're going to have skills that you're going to use over and over again. But there's lots of ways for you to get the same job done. So questions about this? Thoughts about this?
Just to clarify, so the
Yeah.
conference call is everyone will be on the call, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Everybody's on the call because what I'm after is I want the dynamic of, can somebody there, are they being aggressive about asking me questions, right? Because it's not a secret, right? And no one knows what anybody else is bidding, right? It's just a functionality. I want to know, oh, Scott was super engaging in asking questions, and Dustin asked questions, and so and they're going to learn from each other as well. So do you want this functionality or that? Do you want it built in this platform or that platform? Don't really care. It's an MVP, right? So, but know what the functionality is. If it's just content you're testing right now, like if your big question you want to answer about your startup is, does anybody care? Then you could probably do that with one of the previous tools or WordPress and some plugins. So I'll give you a quick sidebar note on that one. So I have a friend who is in the, he's a caterer, good friend of mine I've known for years. He makes amazing cooking oil, and he's an artist. And Joe doesn't know the slightest thing from a website, right? And let alone, commerce enabling and using WooCommerce or how you set up a this or that. And I'm like, dude, come over for dinner. So he came over for dinner, had a glass of wine. I made him cook because he's totally intimidating to cook for, by the way, right? And literally we sat over with a glass of wine and I stood up the site and added WooCommerce and it took us a couple hours, right? I'm like, do you have images for this? Oh, no. I'm like, here's my list of stuff I need you to go get for me, right? But don't be intimidated by stuff like WordPress, because once you learn it, you can use it over and over again, right? If you're like, oh, I need to learn how to program Python, maybe, right? Or maybe not. So stay with what you do best, right, from that perspective, but don't be intimidated to learn, because while you're thinking in your head or stuck in your head about, I just need a technical co-founder, you probably could have learned WordPress, could have stood up WooCommerce, could have added it to a Stripe account, made it connect to your bank, and been like, woohoo, it's done, right? And all the time you spent worrying about it. So just know that that's going to be the case, okay? So simple mechanic, easy to do, Fiverr, literally you could do it in a couple of hours, right? As long as you've done your PowerPoint and your workflows first. Okay, other questions about this process? Yeah.
One thing, so I've been working with General Assembly.
Uh-huh.
They have this program whereby they connect students
Mhm.
with their founders, and those students are looking for a real project to work on.
For sure.
So I mean, it's pro bono, so you could also test that. I mean, they may not be super proficient, but you kind of like
Yep.
going back and then.
Yeah, all the code schools. So the irony of it is Riley used to work at Galvanize. Well, Riley and I worked together at one of my earlier startups, and then Riley worked at Galvanize, I worked at Code Fellows, General Assembly. There's a lot of code schools. If you're looking for a prototype, it's definitely one of the options to pursue. This is one that you get to set deadlines. So one of the things one of the problems you'll find having run a code school is they're trying to finish code school as well as do your project, which usually means they're just in time learning. And you could probably catch up to them at some of them, depending on some of it. Versus having somebody who, they're good programs, don't get me wrong, it's just that they may not have enough experience to finish the thing that you ask them to do. Yeah?
What are some experiments you could prove or disprove using Facebook ads? Because I've done that for my MVP. I put it on a landing page, tried that. My data is not conclusive enough, so how do you go about doing that?
Welcome to startup land. The question is my data is not conclusive enough? Probably won't be. So the thing we'll talk about next month is about unit economics and lifetime value to CAC ratios and conversion rates. So when you start getting into the weeds of all of those things, the idea there is you want to have a hypothesis. So if I'm going to spend $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 on something, I need to have a hypothesis about my conversion ratios and both my lifetime value and my cost of customer acquisition. without one of those, you're missing your denominator, right? So it's like, I'm trying to solve for something. You can run a test, an A/B test. How many of you are doing consumer, B2C, consumer stuff? Okay, awesome. So for the B2B folks, ignore these following comments because you're not going to buy words, you're not going to buy advertising on Facebook. Well, you may buy it on Google AdWords, but you're not going to buy Facebook. So consumer traffic on Facebook doesn't represent intent, it represents demographics. Where somebody searching for keywords on Google AdWords represents intent. I'm searching for something specific, right? I'm going to Bahrain in April. Travel to Bahrain. I'm searching for a specific thing. Versus on Facebook, you're like, I'm looking for a white dude named Dave who's in his 50s. Well, actually, nobody's looking for a white dude named Dave in their 50s on Facebook. But the point is, the point is what you're trying to figure out is do I need somebody who's representing intent, or am I looking for a demographic of a customer profile? I think people who are going to buy my product are women in this age bracket, because I can get down to that level of granularity on Facebook. Like for what you're doing for it, you could test AdWords on Facebook because you're like, this is the demographic I think I want. So you're going to post an ad. You're going to A/B test both the ad and the click-through rates to a landing page that has an offer. That's going to be using a tool for A/B testing. You can use Unbounce. There's a ton of tools for A/B testing. You don't want to do A/B testing yourself. It's a pain in the ass. But the nice thing about doing A/B testing with one of these tools is super cheap. By the way, Unbounce I think is still free for the first 30 days, right? So, and then it's pretty reasonably priced. And you're going to buy traffic and send it to this A/B test landing page. You're going to have two different headlines. The body copy and the offer is going to be the same. You're going to find out what your best who's the winner of that A/B test. That's going to be your main headline. The body copy is the next thing you're going to test. And that's going to pull in, you're going to end up with an A. So basically the A/B testing, for those of you who don't know A/B testing, is you have a hypothesis that your number one ad is going to is this ad, and you're going to call that A. And then you're going to test everything else against that one. So anybody remember Classmates.com? I was on the board at Classmates. Some of you don't remember, which is just so we jokingly called it Match for Old People. So I was on the board when we sold the company. We sold for $156 million in cash. Not a bad deal. It neither became LinkedIn or Facebook. Right? It was a good exit, but it was early. We were past Friendster, so we survived the dot-com bubble, right? But what we did was we A/B tested everything. And She Married Him was one of those ads, if you remember the Yahoo ad days, and that was A. And everything we test against it would just not convert as well. And what we found was we would get tired of an ad way before the customers got tired of the ad, which is why you do A/B testing, because what you think doesn't really matter. What the customer thinks matters. So you're going to test your value proposition, your headline, and your price. You're not going to post the price on the website. You're going to post the price on a hidden page that you can't navigate to unless you have the link. And that's called a squeeze page. There's no other navigation to do. And we'll talk about more about this in the marketing time. But basically, I'm going to send them to a page, and the only thing I'm going to do is take a call to action, or they can retype in the URL string. That's it. So here's my offer, here's my price. And I want you to fill out a form. I want you to give me your email. I want you to give me your credit card information, right? All the way through that process. And you're after it, I just want to see if it closes, right? So in that case, what you're trying to test is, can I buy traffic at reasonable economics? What's the conversion rate of the people who get to the page? How many people fill out that form? So it's conversion rate, conversion rate, conversion rate. And then that allows you to back into a number that says, I think I can acquire a customer for less than $10. Okay. So if that's the case, how much do you have to sell the product for? So pro tip, it's 10 to 1. Mm-hmm. If it's business to business, it's 5 to 1. But if it's 1 to 1, you're not going to make any money. If it's negative, you lose money. So, and I'm totally okay with dropping $500 or $1,000 on ads to test something, because I'd rather do that early and never build the MVP. Right? Some of you are like, but my idea is so good. I would test the shit out of it first and then let the people tell you whether your idea is good. And sometimes it's just the message is too complex, right? All right, so. Yeah. What's that? Unbounce. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorites. There's lots of good ones these days. If you're using WordPress, there's plugins that allow you to do that. And if you're using the tool we talked about earlier from AppSumo, there's A/B testing is built in. But there's lots of great A/B testing tools. There's also a product called LaunchRock that's owned by the folks that own startups.com. And they bought that a few years ago. And basically, you can go in for a subscription. You can buy a domain, park that domain on LaunchRock, pay a fee, get an A/B test landing page, and have it up in, I think, before the next break's over. It would probably take 20 or 30 minutes to do it. Brad?
So relevant tool, if you go to quickmvp.com,
Okay.
there are like 3 or 4 fields that you fill out, and it populates what is essentially a squeeze page. And in it, you can buy Google AdWords. You just like type in, here are the keywords. You have to give them your credit card. I think it's the first 30 days are free, and then it's like $15 a month to have this up. But then you can buy as many AdWords as you want, and then I'm sure, take a little off the top or whatever. But
Great tool. Anybody run AdWords before? Okay, quick word to the wise for if you're new to AdWords. AdWords are always good for Google. May not be good for you, especially if you don't get the negative keywords correct. So we'll talk about marketing next month, but one of my observations there is you can spend a shit ton of money with Google really fast and get no data back. So you have to make sure you kind of follow some of the, here's AdWords 101 and make sure you're spending on the right place. Because if you didn't buy negative ad, or if you didn't take your negative keywords, you can spend a lot of money on those unintentionally super fast and be like, what? Where'd the money go? And it's fast to vaporize that in AdWords spend, just so you know. Yeah.
Is there a floor for ad spend?
No, not really.
Once you're sort of getting
Yeah.
noise.
Well, so yes and no. If you're buying super high traffic AdWords, that clearly is a floor because your ads will never get placed.
Yeah.
If it's super nichey, the answer is not really, because you can buy Facebook to get to a demographic, but you can buy AdWords to get to a long tail.
Yeah.
The problem with the long tail one is you're just not going to see much traffic, so you won't have a statistic. You're not going to have statistically relevant data anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So when you have 1,000 users a day, you can get a statistically relevant data. Right now, what you're trying to prove is, does anybody give a shit about this idea? Right? And so go spend some money on that because it's great spend, because you're like, I thought people were looking for these keywords. Nobody clicked on this. People did click on this. Can I compete with those keywords or not? Right? Yeah. Go ahead.
Just a quick question, like, if people do show interest, but operationally you cannot fulfill,
Uh-huh.
what's the best way to handle that balance?
So the question is, if people do show interest but you can't get them through the purchase process, what's the best way to handle that with a scrunched up face that showed pain?
Yeah.
So my answer to that is I stand up a WooCommerce page, I put in a product, I get you all the way through the process, and I'm like, oh, we're back ordered. Or, hey, sorry, you can sign up for our beta. We're not ready to ship yet. Or our beta's closed, right? So there's a whole bunch of spins on the same thing. That basically the idea is, thanks for showing interest. We're already committed right now to our certain number of users. We'd love to put you on the waiting list, right? LaunchRock is particularly good with this one because what they were good at was like, and by the way, if you want to be on the top of their waiting list, tweet this out to 15 of your friends. And I'm like, damn it, that's a great idea, right? So that's how they did it. Now, will people be disappointed? Yes. Will people be disappointed in your MVP? Yes. Right? So just know that like you're walking, don't cross a line of integrity and keep their credit card information. That's not the point. The point is you're trying to see how committed people are to like, did the value proposition work? Did people know what they were buying? Was it clear enough they could take action or not? Right? So that's what you're trying to test. So go ahead.
Oh, I just was having a visceral response to like, you're going to create distrust, and I think there's some products and some customer bases that are just too delicate and trust is so important that you just don't want to do that. Exactly.
That's true. If you're generally going after a big business to consumer market, the answer is it's worth the risk because there's so many more customers to go after that a few people will be disappointed. But my positive spin on the same message is I really want you to sign up for my email campaign. So one of the things that I've seen done pretty effectively is, hey, thanks for showing interest. We would like to give you a free gift because we're not ready to ship yet, and we're going to give you the free 5-week course to learn X. Right? So bundle something that gives them value. But no, because I totally know my first few versions, I'm like, I don't want somebody to be disappointed in me. I'm like, well, wait a minute, I actually don't know who they are. I bought them on AdWords. So I'm willing to take a certain amount of measured risk. I don't want to disappoint them intentionally. Don't get me wrong, because people are like, David, no integrity. It's like, no, I'm just trying to test. I'm A/B testing stuff. And there's been a bunch of these I've tested that I'm like, not going to do that idea. Like, decided it wasn't worth it. Like, the economics didn't pencil. And we'll talk about all those unit economics deals next month, because there's basically 14 tech revenue models. You may be a subscription. You may be a marketplace. You may be product as a service. Each of them has a different set of unit economics. If you don't know what the numbers are and you don't know how to get them to pencil, and by the way, you need to ask this question before you take out a second mortgage on your house or quit your day job or all that stuff. Like, you just want to have a hypothesis. So you just need to know what it is. Okay? All right. So I want to talk to you about a tool called Business Model Canvas. Anybody know Business Model Canvas? Awesome. We have I don't know if we have experts, but we're going to walk you through it. So Alex Osterwalder, great book, great tool. A lot of MBA and entrepreneurship programs use this. You're going to use this to start to write some of your summary pieces for your monthly mentor updates in the months coming forward. We're going to start with, I'm going to have you go in and actually sign up for Lean Stack tonight. I have a business model canvas that I'm using for the current company we just incorporated last week. I'll share that with you next month as well. So you're going to start with a customer segment, problem and value proposition. I'll say here in a minute. And then every month as we go forward, you're going to just keep using this as your tool to fill it out. So what it does is it forces you to compress your notes into a small space. Like, you can make it a little bit bigger, but the idea with it is you're not trying to write a discourse or a 3-ring binder business plan. You're trying to really just update this on a monthly basis and say, what did I actually get? Like, what do I understand about it? And so here's your pieces that you're going to fill out. So you're going to start here with customer segments. Who's my customer segment? Right? And with that, I'm going to say, who's my early adopters? So my bigger customer looks like this. My early adopters look like this. So there's one of the things I've learned about doing this now, this is the 3rd cohort, is I give you a list of books after every session, because there's a bunch of things that if you're like, I want to go deep on this topic, there's tons of books on each of these topics. So what you're going to find for your early adopters is Crossing the Chasm, as an example, is a great book in this category. Your early adopters are going to find you. You're not going to find them, right? But what you're trying to put together from that list of early adopters is, what's my customer profile really? Right? So I keep using Dustin as an example because you're up for your front, and I built a company that's similar to what he built. So one of the things that a challenge is like, oh, I know people who want to be fundraisers. The challenge of that business is they're volunteers, which means every year you have a new set of volunteers who may or may not be making purchase decisions for tools. Right? So what I know about them is they're leaders and volunteers who run nonprofit organizations who are trying to do fundraising for their event. Great. The early adopters are going to be influencers who do that job more than once. So they're people with multiple kids who are trying to do fundraising and the same sort of stuff. So you see where I'm going with that? So, but what it forces you to do now in your next iteration is you have to fill out section 1. And then you're going to come over here and you're going to say, problem. I have to state what I'm doing in the form of a problem. Now, it can be okay that it's fun is what you're trying to solve. Like, I have a friend who's mentored before in the program in the past, a guy named Dave Bloom. Dave built Z2. Anybody know Z2? They sold to King. Anybody know King? Anybody know Candy Crush? So they sold for $150 million. Dave's like, I don't have any problems. I just sell fun. I'm like, totally legit point, right? So if you're in the fun category, that's fine. But keep in mind, you have a job to be done. And so what's the alternate to buying from you? So in your case, it could be buying from a travel agent, buying from Kayak, right? So the question is, why are they going to go to you to do it? What problem are you solving that's unique, okay? All right, so those are the two. You're going to come down here next month. We're going to talk about revenue streams. How are you going to make money? So, and we're going to spend time on how you monetize, how you market, and how you sell. The good news for you is how you monetize, you just have to pick one. How you sell, there's 4 choices. How you market, oh, there's a shit ton of choices. Like marketing is an incredibly creative endeavor. How many marketers in the room? Ooh, the 2 mentors are like, So marketing is an incredibly creative endeavor, and there's the idea of a hack is interesting, but usually is a shortcut that doesn't last. So there's no pixie dust in the marketing side of things. Sorry, burst the bubble. But so you're going to fill out the first 3. So customer segment, problem, and the start in for revenue streams. Just bring a hypothesis to next month because we're going to drill into that next month. And then over the course of time, you're going to fill all of this in. And what you're going to be able to look at it is like, now I have a decision to make. It's kind of go, no go, right? And some of you won't be back next month because you're like, 20 interviews, man, that's hard. Yep. But here's the difference. If you do 20 interviews a month in the next 3 months, the amount of time it takes you to get to growth and trajectory in your company compresses down a ton. Like if you do 1 interview a month over the next 20 months, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Because you're like, well, I'm still working on my project. It's like, Nick, right? I did 1 interview. It's like, no, just jam all those interviews in as fast as you can, learn as fast as you can, and then make a decision about what you want to do. But if you do 1 interview a month, I won't fire you from here, but I will encourage you not to come back, right? Because that's just painful. Yeah.
So would you recommend changing your survey based on the first round of data you collected?
So the question was, do you recommend changing your survey based on the first round of data collected? I wouldn't necessarily change the survey completely. I may tweak the questions. What I'm trying to build over time is a more cohesive data set, including email names and names of people, so I can build that list. But if you may find that the idea that I started pursuing wasn't the right idea or wasn't the right problem, in which case pivot, right, and start looking at a new idea. Make sense? So, yeah.
Just follow up on that. Well, you use the term interview a lot.
Yep.
But the bigger your list gets, the more you don't really have the opportunity to really have direct contact with those people, right? You're sending out a Google form and you're getting that kind of feedback.
Yep.
Is that the interview you're referring to, or are you actually talking about taking people that respond to those forms and then sitting down with them and walking through some of the things?
So the first version of the mechanic is I want to sit down with somebody and look them in the eyes. So I want to get with Dan, and I'm going to interview, instead of having Dan fill out the form for me, I'm going to interview the form out of Dan. But I'm going to do 20 more interviews next month that are face-to-face. And then I'm going to email Dan my update, right? And I'll walk you through the mechanics of the update. So I've blogged about that as well, because it's like, I'm going to send you an update that says, hey, Dan, thanks for being on our list. Here's what we shipped. It's basically, we're following the same format. Here's what we did, here's what we thought, here's what we did, and here's what we're doing about it, right? And here's where I can use your help. And sometimes Dan will respond. Most people on your list won't respond. But the people who do respond are really going to inform your decisions about what you're going to ship. Like they're going to become your fans, right? And they're going to be the first people to sign up for your product. They're going to be the first person to say, oh, you should talk to Riley. They're going to be the first person to say, right? So they're that list, but once you have them on your list and you've met with them, you can send them an email and an update and a form.
Sure, but next month you're going to do 20 more. Are you looking for 40 eyeballs a month, or are you just sending out and getting 20 responses?
Yeah, so I'm going to do 20 interviews that are new. I'm going to add that 20 to my list, right? And basically over the course of 12 months, I'm going to try to build 200 people on my email list.
In person.
And B2B, by the way, is really hard because you're going to spend the last 3 weeks just scheduling the 20 interviews, and they're going to be out 2 months, right? And that's why B2B, it's one of the things we learned about doing Startup Weekend. People come to Startup Weekend and they're like, woohoo, I've got 4 hours on Saturday to do customer development. And it's like, good luck, right? Because there are no IT managers available for you to interview. Now, if you're going to do something in Bellevue Square, the answer is congratulations, right? But you can do consumer. So it takes a lot of, it takes a lot of work, but it will compress your time for success. So, or it will help you kill bad ideas faster, which is totally cool too, right? So by the way, I have a bunch of people who send me email after this session and the next session, and they're like, I did the interviews and I decided not to pursue the idea. And I'm like, woohoo, saved you 3 years of your life, right? From personal experience, right? Because pursuing a bad idea is just super time wasting. You can make money back, but you can't get time back, okay? So yeah, first interviews are there. All right, so I'm going to encourage you now to go to LeanStack, sign up, fill in your first customer segments, your problem, and your value proposition. Take a few minutes to do that right now. We'll take a break and grab some waters, but take some minutes right now and fill that out.
Missing something.
What's that?
I'm missing something. Or which section is there?
Oh, they updated it. Sorry, changed it. Is there a? It has a new.
Do add
It has a guide now.
project details.
It's my first project. I can fill that in. Looks like it has a wizard. It's not as easy to just fill out those 3 things as last time. So,
Well, so when it first started, it said start with the guides or go to something. And I clicked start with the guides.
so go back and let's see if they can go right to the form. I hate it when they change their process and I have fixed slides. Thanks, bud. Good to see you. Welcome back. When do you travel?
Next weekend.
Okay. All right. Well,
Maybe next week?
coffee. Yeah. He's launching a startup in India.
Oh, cool.
So doing direct business to consumer marketing is hard. Doing it cross-culturally feels like it's impossible. So it's just a hard thing to do. So.
Yeah, and then the next couple
Yep.
minutes.
Did that work?
So
Did anybody get past the wizard?
404,
404. How ironic.
okay, so if you go back to like LeanStack,
Okay.
it takes you here. If you already clicked that, and then just click back in, and it takes you to Lean Canvas.
Got it.
But if you got there, just go straight to the canvas, not the guides.
Yeah. So skip the guide and go straight to the canvas. So definitely save this one to your browser because you're going to be using this again every month. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. See you soon.
I think there's a rendering glitch. Should I be seeing
Look at that.
one?
Well, scroll over to the side. There you
I'm
go.
really dumb.
Yeah, that's okay. It was up on the previous screen, but why they didn't put them in mathematical order of like the most important ones, don't know.
So I think you have to get invited to the Slack channel.
Oh, the Slack channel is in the invite on the website on DK Parker.
Oh,
So-
that website URL that you took a snapshot of there.
So go to DK Parker. Anybody else need the Slack channel invite? Okay, so go to dkparker.com, click on 6-month startup and cohort 3 for Seattle, and the invite is right on that list. All the resources are right there. I'm not smart enough to print out materials to you, so just like, so, okay? All right. A few things here in closing, and then you guys can wrap up on it, but I want to, next session, I'm going to send out a poll, by the way, because April 10th is spring break for a lot of folks that have kids, so I'm going to send out a poll if we want to move it back a week, just so you know.
Can I
So,
move it back a week?
can you move it back? So 1 vote for move back a week. Not sending out the poll yet. So next month's session is kind of my geekiest session. It's the one that the bulk of the book content is about. So I kind of backed into this exercise of doing a research project that Carson's helped me out with. So about 5 or 6 years ago when I was at Startup Weekend, I went to the CEO of Crunchbase and I'm like, hey, can you give me a list of every funded company, seed funded company in the last like 18 months? So I ended up with a list of 2,600 funded companies. So the question was, well, if I needed to give you a financial model, because I was doing I had some financial, somebody asked me for a copy of my financial template. And the question was, well, how many templates would you need to make to cover like 80% of the market? So come to find out, there's 14 tech models. That's it. I think I have 5 of them as templates that you'll get a promo code for next month if you decide to come. Because there's nothing worse than looking at a blank spreadsheet when you're trying to build out a 3-year model. It's like completely nauseating. So the exercise then became, well, like, now we have this 5-year track record of companies that got funded, got sold, and closed. So the bulk of a big chunk of the content for the book that I'm trying to finish is the meat of those numbers. So anybody doing a subscription business? All the key metrics for subscriptions are basically written down in the model. On your assumptions tab, you can go to the assumptions tab and say product 1, product 2, product 3. What's my price? But you can't do hand wavy stuff because hand wavy stuff doesn't actually fit into a cell on Excel. You actually have to put in a number, right? So you're like, so part of the reason you do customer interviews, you're like, what should we charge for it? You're like, I don't know, but I have to put in a number because you can't be like, well, we could kind of do a freemium thing. Freemium is called marketing. It's okay, freemiums are good, but it's just marketing, right? So basically we're gonna break down what's the marketing process, what are the sales process, how do you monetize and make money? Pick a model, you'll get a code for a template, download the template, build your financial model. The financial model is an exercise that will take time away from you building your MVP, work on customer interviews first, because financial models, it's kind of a running joke in venture capital. We know you're wrong when you send us a financial model. It's really the exercise on knowing that you know how to do the discipline of a financial model, right? And is it going to go up and to the right? It should. Are you going to get to $100 million in the first 4 years? No.
Did you say billion?
So billion, wrong. So Carson ran a report for me recently and went back and looked at the last 10 years of the Inc. 500 list. So for those of you who don't know, the Inc. 500 is the fastest 500 growing companies in the US that start with more than $1 million in revenue. The median return on that 10 years, anybody want to guess what on the 5-year span? So 1 million to what? Puts you in the top 10. Any guess?
50 million.
50 million? Any other guesses? 1 billion? 2 million?
10 million.
10 million? 40 million? So the answer is 47 million. So if you go from 1 million to 47 million in revenue in 4 or 5 years, you're in the top 10 of the Inc. 500 list. You don't have to get to a frickin' billion, right? You don't have to get to 100 million. You just, like, from $1 million to $40 million is a big fucking number. My first company went from 0 to 32 million in 4 years. Do you know how many mistakes I made? Oh my God, it was horrible. Like I have scars on my back. I still get twitchy at times, right? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff that I just made a ton of mistakes with. Because you're growing so fast, right? That there's no way you can get in front of stuff. So, by the way, not super advisable, by the way. Like it's completely hair on fire, like craziness. But that's a fast growth number, right? So when you do the financial model, you're gonna get advice from me about like, dial it in about here. This is kind of where you need to be. Like it's reasonable and it's believable. The worst one is someone's like, I went from 1 to 1 billion or 120 million. And all that really shows me is that you know how to use Excel now. It doesn't show me you know anything about the business. But people are like, yeah, but you don't understand, you didn't see my model. I'm like, I don't need to see your model. That would put you as the fastest growing company ever. Like bigger than Dell Computers. That would be amazing. I would love to back that, right? Do I think you're gonna do it? No.
Will the next session also cover the startup valuation? Because I watch a lot of the subscription food companies, right?
Right.
I think their revenue is less than what you just talked about, but their valuation is like $100 million or $200 million.
So the question was, will the next session talk about valuation? So a little bit, but I'm going to burst a bubble on part of that. The enterprise value of a company is based on a combination of, it's a mix of profitability, growth, market share. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into it. There's 3 methods for doing valuations. At this point, none of you are big enough to be able to use any of those 3 methods. I can walk you through how they do it, but basically it's a combination of factors, and there's 3 methodologies for doing it. So because I've been on 9 transactions at this point. As it relates to your startup, the answer is there's no math formula to say what's your company worth.
And then how you come up with the pre-money valuation.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in month 5 when we talk about investor prep and kind of an investor funding 101, because you need to know that it's basically a bid ask. You think your company's worth $100 million. I think your company's worth $4 million. Now we're in a negotiation, right? And what you're going to really base it on is the market comparables. So companies like yours at this stage with this many engineers, with this much revenue and customers, I can pretty much tell you the ballpark of what you're going to be able to raise. It's always going to be 25 to 33% of the total raise. So there's some heuristics that I can tell you that the middle of the lane on the heuristics look like this. But there's no math formula at this stage to do valuations. Yeah?
When I went through the Y Combinator startup school,
Mm-hmm.
that question came up, and the answer from our advisor was, well, mostly it's kind of whatever your gut picks between $1 and $10 million on like a early stage startup valuation. They said in the Valley they just literally pull something out of their rear end and see if it sticks. that's literally what they said.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty accurate. So one of the new idea I'm working on is called Lumeric. So the company's called Lumeric, and one of the things we're trying to do is to take your data from your company when you have revenue, put it into capture that data, and then benchmark you against your peer set, and then also look at who raised money when, based on how much money they were doing in revenue, based on their revenue model. Because if yours is a subscription and yours is a marketplace, those are 2 different things. So I can't benchmark you against a services company, but I can benchmark you against other product companies. So that's one of the things we're trying to do, is flip that model on its head and say, because right now the VCs go, well, I think your valuation's a little high. Trust me on this one, it's painful but true. And you're like, really? Based on what? Because as a VC, I know the deals I've written and the deals I lost or the deals I passed on. So my data set is super small. Now it's bigger than yours. So anytime you have information asymmetry, I win. So what we're trying to do is flip the model and say, no, we have all of the data, and it favors founders. We think that's a better way to go about it. So the VCs will hate it, which is why I love it, right? So, because the VCs aren't my customer. So.
Have you looked into CB Insights? They do the same thing.
CB Insights does it, but much more upmarket.
Yeah.
If you look at the average size, and the same thing is true for PitchBook.
Yeah.
So PitchBook's great until you get less than $5 million in revenue, which is where most of the opaque data is. And when you get less than $1 million in revenue, super opaque. So yeah, we think we're going to end up selling it to PitchBook or CB Insights, by the way.
The CB Insights account comes for $50,000 per year. Like, I mean,
What's that?
like those accounts are very expensive.
Yeah, PitchBook's $50,000 a year, or $25,000 a year.
That you have to be a large company.
Yeah, we're going to be like $99 a month.
Great.
So there you go.
Sign up.
You need revenue first, otherwise it's not super useful. So when you have revenue, it can be super useful. Before revenue, the answer is you need to go focus on getting revenue. So, but yeah, we're kind of a fan of flipping the model on its head.
I might have missed something somebody said over there, but when does discounted future cash flow start to carry weight from your perspective?
So DCF, discounted future cash flow, is if you're doing a 409A valuation, you can definitely use discounted future cash flow. You can use asset-based. So there's basically 3 methodologies for how you do it. I won't bore you guys with it right now, because if you're super interested in it, great. We can talk about it over a beer. But the big difference, Riley, right now is if you look at sub 1 million in revenue, if you get good at being forecasting and predicting your revenue, I can build a business case for why your company should be valued on 12-month future revenue if your forecast is predictable. If your forecast is super lumpy and you had a product early and you have a new product now and you don't, I'm going to build a business case for why you should say on trailing 12 months of revenue, and it'll be discounted. But so what you're after in this is you're building a forecastable, predictable machine that generates forecastable revenue. If you do that, the answer is raising money is not really a big challenge, right? But if you're like, we don't really know who our customer is, raising money is a huge challenge. So having a hypothesis about it matters a lot. So north of 5 million in revenue and $1 million in EBITDA, the answer is woo. I can calculate.
Universal. Like as soon
Yep.
as your financial model carries some statistical significance, then pay more attention to it.
Yeah. So one of the big differences. So of the 100, well, I saw 180 pitches in the last 12 months. If I took the top 100 and I called them and said, hey, I'm looking at your deck from 6 months ago. How'd you do on your forecast to actual? Most of them would say, well, my forecast to actual was based on me getting money from you. So that's 90%, right? So the deals that we liked and did due diligence on and wrote checks for had a different approach, which is with or without you, we are going to go do X. And if I called and said, hey, how did you do? And they're like, we're 97% of plan. We're 114% of plan. The answer is you will get a check written fast. Because I recognize that if I don't write a check, I'm not going to get in at that price point, right? So you have to write the plan based on what I know and what I can go do with or without the money. So again, preview for next month, a little too much content from that perspective. So bore you guys with financial models early. So that's April 10th. So
Just maybe related to that.
yeah,
There's money and then there's users.
yes.
And it seems there's a lot of focus on money, but there's also a lot of value in having a large user base.
Sometimes.
Especially if it's
Sometimes.
non-linear growth, right?
So the good news, thank you for pointing out Model 12. So revenue Model 12 is called New Media. So anybody know WhatsApp? Okay, great. Anybody know Pinterest? Okay. So that business had the ability to do what was called a viral coefficient. So, or K-factor is the way the math is calculated. So it'll be on the slide next month. So there's commerce, which is I sell somebody else's product and make a margin. There's subscription, which is I get a recurring revenue. There's marketplace. And up here in the ones that are like, they're amazing and they're pixie dust, and frankly, you don't need a revenue model because your user growth is so psycho, is called New Media. So for every paid customer I acquire for $15 or $20 or whatever, I get multiple people invited, and I get more than 2 signups that activate based on that single paid user. So anything north of 2 is amazing. The number of companies that get to 3, Pinterest, early days Facebook, WhatsApp.
Using TikTok.
What's that?
TikTok.
They got to be close as well. So I haven't seen their numbers. So Classmates had 2.1, 2.2, right? Which is just, it's on the border of like amazeballs. Right.
Why 2 is so important? Is that just because of unique economics?
You get non-linear user growth, right? Or as you guys see it this way, right? So basically you can calculate a viral coefficient. By the way, never seen it on a B2B company ever. Never. If you say like, we're B2B and we're going viral, the answer is no. I just affirmed why you're delusional, right? I have.
Are B2B and you do go that way, then
Oh my God! I will write you a check. I've had two organizations in the last 2 years make the claim. I'm like, here's how you do the math. Like, I will help you do the math, right? And they came back and said, no, we're not above 2. And I'm like, it's good. So you can have a network effect. That's marketing. Network effect is good, right? But a viral coefficient is rare air. And
They were able to get that.
Slack is close. They have a network effect, but not greater than 2. So, yeah.
So Uber and Lyft has 2 platforms. One is the driver platform and one is the user platform. Where do you find them on your spectrum?
They're a marketplace.
A marketplace.
So again, think again, launch to scale. At scale, a business that generates that much cash can have multiple revenue models. Totally cool. At launch, you get one. So they were a marketplace. That was how they started. That's what they do. And today they have more than one way to make money. But yeah, we'll break down and go through all of them next month, by the way. And if you go to DK Parker, there's a list of all the revenue models is a slide deck. So you can get a preview there if you want to get a preview. I'm, again, super geeky about this topic, so I will try not to nauseate you with it. But I'm like, I found like, wow, I don't have to build my own revenue model from scratch. And the answer is, cool, okay? All right, so you have deliverables. You don't need to write these down. They are on the deliverables page. This is what you need to do for next month. You write down your value proposition. You keep doing customer interviews. You're going to do your business model canvas. You're going to get your product ready so you can have somebody else build it, okay? it is a lot of work. So if you get partway through it and you want to come, just know that you're not going to meet with the mentors necessarily. But if you do the work, you'll like some of the mentors next month as well. They're great folks. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.